Thank you for a lovely warm welcome. Actually, I was sitting at that side of the audience last year, and it's nice to be up here today. Actually, I'm probably more known for podcasting, and that's how I know you as well. I've grown a little YouTube empire for interviewing people and histories and mysteries, and it's what I'm passionate about. But I have been soldering away at acoustics and astronomy of megalithic cultures for quite a long time now. I'm going to talk today about the Megalithic Acoustic Mystery, a quest to understand altered states of ancient temples. And it really has become a quest for me. A little bit about me, as you said, I'm an author, engineer, and systems analyst. I'm actually pretty lucky with my engineering career. I spent about 14 years in Britain working as an engineer, traversing pretty much the whole of the British Isles. And in doing so, I worked as a renewable energy consultant, systems analyst on electromechanical systems and electronic systems for power stations, wind farms, water treatments, and they were always in very remote areas. I lived in Penzance in Cornwall, the Brecon Beacons in Wales, in the Orkneys, and in the Shetlands and the Outer Hebrides, and Lockerbie as well. And in all those districts that I'd always worked in, I'd always checked out megalithic sites, and I'm incredibly privileged to have traversed Britain and Ireland for that matter. I actually grew up in Newgrange, about 10 miles from Newgrange, and I now live in Northern Ireland, but that was my first passion with megaliths, was Newgrange, and my first book, the Newgrange Sirius Mystery, you'll hear about tomorrow. Saying all that, it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I actually academically looked at megaliths. I guess I found the allure and the mystery of megaliths quite passionately when I was in my young 20s. And like I said, I was privileged to be in all those domains where the megaliths were. And I got to provide myself with a database without even knowing it for my future career, which is what I'm doing now. I don't like to talk about myself too much, but it is pertinent to what I'm going to talk about today, because I actually had a serendipitous event, which you'll hear about tomorrow, and I'll save for tomorrow, but I found some rock art with some astronomy on it, which I had the pleasure of showing you last week in Ireland. And it really catapulted me into what I'm doing now, because I realised as a systems analyst that the job wasn't being done, and if I see something wrong, I fix it. That's what I do. I'm an engineer. And I found constellation and rock art in the north of Ireland, and it wasn't even in the record, and that was in 2007. And that's why I ended up writing the book, The Newgrange Sirius Mystery. Setting that aside, I did realise I also had a skill set to look at the problem in a different way, because we're looking at a very fragmented culture. They left us an incredible host of monuments, from stone circles, dolmens, passage tombs. Passage tombs, what I'm going to get into a lot later, is what I primarily focus on for a reason, because they're incredibly interesting. They have a lot of art, and the ones in Ireland anyway, and they have alignments. There's a lot of stuff that you can figure out. I think there's a lot of stuff that is very difficult to figure out, and I started with the easiest method, and I looked at it from a very, I guess, holistic, wider view with the complexity of all the monuments. It's a lot slower to do that. And I revere people who spend their time at one individual site and provide a massive body of work on individual sites. And that's not me. I look at things a different way. I look at things as I want all the data, I want to see what's comparative, and I want to see why that is and why it's not comparative. Why we have different regions, particularly the northwest of Ireland is very interesting. We have specific monuments there that don't occur anywhere in the rest of megalithic Europe, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow. Megaliths and acoustics. I actually didn't even want to write this book, and this is coming out, hopefully, it's actually been re-released this month with extra information. And I actually didn't even want to write this book, but I found myself traversing Ireland, writing an astronomy book and researching it. And I realised, and I was always aware, I remember reading about Paul Devereux and Stonehenge Soundtracks, which is a wonderful book. If you haven't read it, I suggest that. It's a great starting point. Inside the Neolithic Mind by David Lewis Williams as well. So I was aware of this body of work and the knowledge of acoustics encoded within. Wasn't entirely sure whether I believed in it or not, and I wasn't entirely sure if you could figure it out, but I was aware of the knowledge anyway. So I thought I would do acoustics testing as a little systems analyst, doing my thing alongside the astronomy research. Because particularly, I'm an efficient engineer, and I thought it was interesting, and I didn't want to traverse Ireland and Britain 3 years later and do the whole thing again, second time. So I doubled up on the research, basically. And this is the body of knowledge that I found myself getting into. Human consciousness, belief systems, imagery and symbolism, social complexity of megalithic peoples, right brain cultures, geometry and design of monuments, rhythm and sound, frequency and resonance. And like you mentioned, I have a background in physics. I have an academic degree in physics, and I did that to get out of engineering because I wanted to have a change of career. Had I actually sat down to design my own future on pen and paper, I couldn't have actually done it better than it actually accidentally happened. But nonetheless, all my research and engineering career is all kind of pertinent to what I'm going to talk about today and tomorrow. And I just find I'm very privileged to have a skill set that I can actually make some sense of some stuff. Archaeoacoustics is an extremely wide research field. It could be applied to archaeological sites or archaeological artifacts. The entire research encompasses acoustics, architectural design and geometry, archaeology, ethnomusicology, prehistory, ancient civilizations, and megalithic monuments. You'll see this little bone flute here. It's probably one of the old, I think this is another one 41,000 years old, but this one's 35,000 from Germany. And there's actually an audio clip you can find online if you want to play and hear what it listens to. But our love affair with music goes back a very, very long time. There's another one I've actually seen in the Vienna Museum as well. I just think it's amazing that we have artifacts going back that long with musical scales. I really do. And it beckons that we've kind of lost something in our past. And I just love the subject of archaeoacoustics because we can apply the physics to figure out things at sites or artifacts, see are we right or in a right way of thinking. And it's a very, very powerful field. The physics is actually not that very hard to understand some of the acoustics. It's actually schooled by physics. It's not very advanced like, but there is some basic science to get through. Astroacoustic cultures is a better label. Everywhere you look, ancient Egypt, the Great Pyramid is an acoustic machine as well as an astronomical calculator. Mesoamerica, right across Chichen Itza, the Great Ball Court, Pyramid of Kukulkan, Uxmal, Palenque. They're all astronomical masterpieces as well as acoustic machines as well. Ancient Peru, Cusco and Moray, Chavan de Huantar, alongside many examples of archaeoastronomy and acoustics encoded into the monuments. Neolithic and megalithic, which I'm going to concentrate a little bit on today. The culture and the structures are inherently focused on acoustics side by side with the astronomical monuments, particularly the chambers. Astronomy on the megalithic chambers, there's astronomy on the outside and acoustics on the inside, where the sun dagger would penetrate some of these chambers in Ireland. I just find it amazing that we have so many cultures around the globe, and that's why I'm going to do a little global perspective. That's what I started off in the book. I did a first section on a global perspective or an overview of the astroacoustic culture. Great Pyramid, there's the equinox alignment. You can see this rare photograph here with the shadow lines that only occur on the equinox. It's also an acoustic chamber inside. It's, again, example of Egypt being in an astroacoustic culture. The King's Chamber there, these are known as the relieving chambers. You can see that they're flat on one side and roughly hewn on the other. And they act like resonating chambers. It's actually a major misnomer, the name relieving chambers. It's actually probably more of a nightmare to put that chamber in its location where it's situated 1/3 up the Great Pyramid, because it's actually putting stress into the structure. And as an engineer, it would be a logistical nightmare to do that. So there's no relieving of stress. It's actually putting more stress into the building. But so the Egyptologists have called it a relieving chamber. The granite beams are rough, hewn on one side. That is for an acoustic reasoning. It's the only one that explains it. And that's what makes the cavities resonate, and it's extremely difficult to insert those beams in place. They're extremely heavy, they're all side by side, and then you have to stack them and layer them and leave a pocket of space in between as well. It acts like a giant acoustic machine. Same at Chichen Itza. Here we have in Yucatan, that's the El Caracol Observatory, that's the Pyramid of Kukulkan there. Again, we have, there's yours truly on the equinox last year, and that's what the equinox looks like. Again, shadow lines on the equinox, encoding the astronomy into a pyramid. And it also echoes like the Quetzal bird. It's known for its vibrant plunge. The resplendent Quetzal was revered by the Maya and associated with the feathered serpent deity Kukulkan, to whom that namesake temple is dedicated. Acoustic studies have revealed compelling similarities between the pyramid's chirping echo and the call of the sacred bird. As you stand at the base of that pyramid and you clap your hands, you'll hear the sound of that bird coming back down the steps. And it's an acoustic marvel that it either mimics the bird or they intentionally put it in it. Or personally, I think that they did the astronomy first and they've manipulated the steps of that pyramid. And you'll see that there's a deliberate manipulation of structures. Whether they built over 5,000 pyramids, so they have a lot of time to manipulate these later structures and pyramids to get these acoustic enhancements right. But again, it's a great example of a pyramid with acoustic and equinox alignment. The Great Ball Court, been there last September, it's absolutely amazing. Conversations can be heard from one end to another at a specific locations. And I'll just show you where they are. This is an overview here. If you stand at that location there, and you stand at that location there, you can hear clearly conversations from one end to the other if you just whisper to the other person. And it's an incredible achievement, considering that you have the sense that you're in the open air. You can see that there's quite tall walls here. Basically what happens is it holds in standing waves there, and these perimeter walls then reflect the sounds back in again. It's an incredibly complex sound map to explain all that. And there again, there's an aerial photograph there. But again, superb acoustics. There's the measurements there. It's actually 540 feet long. You can barely see the person at the other end, but yet you can hear them clearly. Each end has a raised temple area, and a whisper can be heard. Some 500 feet away from where both people stand. Actually, this guy here, Leopold Stokowski, in 1931, he spent 4 days on the site trying to determine acoustic principles that could be applied to an open-air concert theatre that he was designing. That's how superb the acoustics are. And if anybody been to Mexico here? Wow, okay. You probably, guys, it's quite popular on the tours now. I actually tried to do a video clip, and I couldn't have 5 minutes piece without somebody clapping their hands to get the chirping echo and stuff there. But it's quite popular for people to be showing this on the tours now. Again, the Castillo and Palenque. You stand there at the foot of the temple and shout, the echo comes back as a piercing shriek. Or a person standing at the top step can speak into a normal voice and be heard that was at ground level for some distance. Its quality is also shared with another main pyramid at Tikal. It's actually all to do with the steps of the pyramid and how waves traverse down those steps. Think about the Epidaurus Theatre, though, these Greek amphitheatres. They work in the same way. The sound will travel directly in a straight line and will also go down the steps, and as they both meet and reflect, it comes back as an amplified sound. You're basically getting two sound waves joining together and amplifying. Again, was that intentional or was it not, is the question I'm going to try and answer. But they may have been aware of it on their first structure, and then second structure they may have tried to enhance that. Temple of the Magician Uxmal Pyramid, Yucatan. This is absolutely amazing, this pyramid. Again, that's got the same chirping bird echo, and it looks like a totally different design as well. Person stands at the base of the pyramid, it gets the same chirping echo coming back at the observer point. Here we go to Peru, Moray. There's yours truly looking like Inspector Gadget there with the heat, but I'm actually sitting at that location just about there on one of those steps. And when you stand at the rim of that crater, you can hear conversations being heard. And again, there is another bowl in there. If you stand inside that bowl, you can hear conversations being heard inside that bowl too. It's absolutely amazing acoustic wonder. Did they design it that way? People think that these were made for microclimates. There's actually so much going on at this place, it's unreal. But they may have had their own microclimate per a ring of steps, perhaps different seasons for different vegetables and crops they were growing. Charan de Huántar in Peru as well. This is actually a trumpet made from a seashell. And these stone chambers are actually reminiscent of some of the stuff we have in Europe. It's actually an underground citadel. And there we have it with the trumpets and stones. Archaeologists unearthed 20 of these. I won't try the pronunciation, but the marine shell trumpets in 2001. They actually were polished, painted, and etched with symbols and shells, and had formed mouthpieces with distinct V-shaped cuts. And if the shells played inside the stone chamber, they were found that the drone would have sounded like it was coming from several different directions at once. And as you'll see with the Hypogeums in Sardinia and Malta later, that's just exactly the same feeling that you get. It's like sound is coming at you from all directions simultaneously. Corrie Cancha in Cusco, this place is absolutely beautiful. The masonry there is incredible. These three lasers gone. These three little stone drill holes on the left are a little Quechua guy actually told me and explained that these actually used to ring like panpipes. When the winds blow in the windy season, they would howl through these holes and it would activate the Corrie Cancha inside. And basically it would be like panpipes playing. They're actually at different lengths, those holes as well, giving you three different notes, and it would have played like a musical instrument. These, if you speak into one of these, you can hear the sound being heard inside another one. There's just acoustics everywhere in Peru. All different sites, different varieties, different reasons. Again, riddled with astronomy and acoustics. Coming to megaliths, Stonehenge acoustics. This is not my research, this is Dr. Rupert Till and Dr. David Keaton and his comrade Aaron Watson. Both independent investigations that have been done to Stonehenge, showing you the superb acoustic amplifier auditorium hypothesis. It's really, really interesting, the results. They use this thing here, which is an omnidirectional speaker. It sends sounds or tones or pulses in all directions simultaneously. And then they put out a load of different microphones at different perimeters and different radiuses and check for measurements. And this guy here, he's a University of Huddersfield, he's a musicologist up there. Both of them come up pretty much with the same results. I think what's interesting is this guy on the left, Dr. Rupert Till, he made an effort to go over to the USA. This little imposter on the right is a replica of the real Stonehenge. As you can see, it's made out of concrete, but it's in Washington State. And all made out of concrete, it does serve for acoustic testing of the monument as it's a complete structure. I'm not entirely sure they have the internal layout exactly right, because I don't think it's exactly known, but nonetheless, the results are very interesting. And that's it in a physics sense. This basically, on the left, is called linear interference, and this on the right is non-linear interference. Basically, you'll see two pulses when they come together, they add and they amplify to a big pulse, and going in a peak and a trough, they will come and they'll cancel each other out to zero. It's just exactly the same on the other side. The only difference is it's going out in all directions, and you'll have like circular concentric rings of sound waves coalescing with each other. And we call that constructive and destructive interference. Effectively, these two doctors of acoustics basically have proved that there's a perimeter around Stonehenge that you can walk at, that you'll hear a period of audio amplification, and then you'll hear a period of almost silence. Acoustic standing waves and altered states of consciousness. Understanding some of the basics will understand the art and design of passage tombs. Up until this point, it's hard to say whether the intentional design of the acoustics that I've just explained to you, Archaeoacoustics can show you an understanding of the monuments in an acoustical sense, but it doesn't show you the intention. Personally, I think that the passage tombs of Europe, predominantly Ireland and Scotland, and some of the long barrows for that matter, are intentionally designed in acoustic ways, and there's a lot of reasoning for that, which I'm going to get into. And this is my main body of research in the book, by the way, the Megalithic Acoustic Mystery. I actually, in 2006, I read Graham Hancock's book on supernatural, and in it he had a listed chart of entoptic phenomena, the shapes and symbols and imagery that you see when you go into an altered state of consciousness. And whether you do that with acoustics or entheogens, it doesn't matter, you'll see the same entoptic imagery. And when I've seen the list and the chart for entoptic imagery, which you'll see in a moment, it led me down a route of, I just seen rock art that was prevalent at Newgrange and other places in Ireland. And that's what led me down the research. I knew there was something bigger to it, and the research wasn't actually done. But let's move to standing waves for a moment. This is important to understand. You can ignore the complex formulas on the right there just to show you harmonics. But basically, a note inside two fixed walls, whether you're chanting, drumming, a string on a guitar with two fixed lengths, that's a standing note or a standing wave. It's got two fixed constraint ends. And as it does, you can put harmonics, and that's where you see the formula for the harmonics. But basically, standing waves is when a sound note is trapped within a structure. It's highly relevant to passage tombs and chambered mounds. Standing waves set up inside passage tombs, they not only amplify, but they make it appear as if the sound comes from everywhere at once. Just like I explained with the drone from the trumpets in Mexico, or Peru, sorry. The Helmholtz resonator effect. This is really interesting. Again, we have another little complicated formula here for a Helmholtz resonator. You're probably already familiar with a Helmholtz resonator. If you had a wine bottle and you blew into the top of a wine bottle, you'll hear a frequency or a note. So basically, you have a narrow neck into a big chamber. Picture that as a bottle or a flask or whatever, a canister. What changes the note of that Helmholtz resonator or bottle or chamber? Basically is the length of the neck, the area of the neck, and that's important, we're the area here, and the volume or the inside of that chamber, whether that's a wine bottle or a passage tomb. But essentially this is no different to a passage tomb. Passage tombs are natural Helmholtz resonators. The question is the intention, or even more so, the manipulation of the design to enhance the effect of a Helmholtz resonator. I'm going to show you an example in a moment. The sheer quantity of chambers mounts in Europe and the evolution in design tending towards long, extremely bottleneck chambers. Most people just see the passage tombs of Europe. I've been to probably about 600, by the way, across Europe. I only know that because there's like 127 in Ireland and 54 in Holland, and I can add up the regions, and so there's so many per region. It's a rough number. I didn't actually count them all, but the passage tombs of Europe, there's so many of them. They all look the same on the outside. They look like a mound of earth and a dome-shaped mound, but inside there's lots of different geometries and designs. This one in County Leitrim in Ireland, by the way, Sheebeg Cairn, you can see the extremely long neck on the passageway, and then the chamber. These recesses are common as well. Sometimes you just have the one chamber, you have three recesses like a cruciform shape, and sometimes we don't have so long a chamber. Sometimes we have half of that length. But sometimes we have 5 recesses as well. But there seems to be some sort of a generic plan, 3 or 4 different generic plans to follow. This is the entopic phenomena artwork that you see in an altered state of consciousness. There's so many different symbols there. Actually, that's a very short list that I drummed up for the purpose. And these are different examples: sand rock art in Kosovo, the Paleolithic rock art, entopic phenomena from a scientific consciousness tests. But basically, these are the shapes and symbols that you see going into an altered state of consciousness, whether that's acoustics or entheogens. Induced altered states of consciousness, they produce the entopic imagery. The acoustics and entheogens are both combined, or the both combined produce altered states of consciousness. Megalithic chambers in Ireland boast huge quantities of ASC-induced entopic artwork, and that's the key, because that's telling us that these guys were aware of the acoustics of these monuments. They may have took substances as well as that. There's evidence for that. But 2 types of artwork prevalent: astronomical artwork and altered state of consciousness induced entopic imagery. They're not necessarily distinct from one another, those 2 types of artwork. Sometimes the artwork is combined where you see a mixture of consciousness rock art, if you want to call it that, or astronomical rock art. They may have used spirals and other entopic imagery for their symbolism to represent their complex set of ideas. And I'm open to spirals being geospirals. Like I know Maria, she researches for divining. They probably had many uses for these symbols. So moving on to chambered mounds and acoustics. Passage tombs, cairns, tumuli, long barrows. I don't like these names, by the way. They're incredibly, mind-numbing names to explain something that's probably like a Stone Age university is what I like to call them. incredibly complex structures. This is actually Nost, the Great Mound of Nost, and it's got 18 satellite tombs around it. It's probably a lunar temple mapping the sidereal and synodic lunar month. I'll explain all that tomorrow. But it's an incredibly long chambers as well, giving you a Helmholtz resonance. The longest passageway, and there's 2 passageways in the east and the west. It's an incredibly complex site. They say Newgrange in the Boy Valley is the most complex megalithic site in the world, encompassing some 40 passage tombs just within 3 miles of each other in astro and acoustics. Those passage tomb, you can see there they've built a ledge to protect the curbstones. It's actually falling over it and they've removed them, but there's 127 in total. The Toptic imagery curbstones, this K42 and K45, these are on the list of entoptic imageries, what we would call floating circles. And this one is a spiral with 2 bars left and right of it, as you can see. One's got more bar, it's like concentric rings around a bar. It's a very specific image, and it's an entoptic image. And I'm going to show you as many cases as I can. I have time to anyway with entoptic images. K78, K17. Again, this long squiggly line here, this like a serpentine squiggle, that's an entoptic imagery. So is the band of circles as well, and combining the 2 together is a double entoptic image on the left. Spirals with inside, because you don't normally just see one entoptic image, you see them all in a matrix when you're in an altered state of consciousness, which I've actually experimented with, by the way, and I can speak with experience. But so that's what you're looking at. You're looking at groups of entoptic images layered on top of each other. Here's another example of entoptic images. There's actually a line there, and there's actually the reverse image, like it's a mirror. It's very hard to see in that photograph, by the way, but there's 2 U-shaped, it's like there's a mirror of it flipped like that. But entoptic imagery, and that stone actually mirrors above the horizontal line. It's very hard to see, but there's 127 curbstones at Nost Mound. Most are decorated with one form of art or the other. The artwork in many cases can be solely explained by astronomy or solely explained by entoptics. There is an overlap of combined use that I mentioned with the imagery. The best example of that is the serpentine squiggle. For example, it's a pure, straight example of entoptic imagery. And it's also got 19 turns on it as well, giving you a lunar number, and you can see that the stone that it's wrote on is aligned to the moon, and so they're using their entoptic imagery as a way of representing their astronomy in a way. It's like a combined or efficient use of their artwork and symbolism. Oh, my beloved Carrowkeel. This is one of my favorite megalithic places in the world. It's a pretty unique place. It actually looks like a giant, the whole mountain range looks like a giant right hand palm down. And as you drive into the complex, you're driving into where the finger and the thumb is. And there's passage tombs dotted all around on the fingertips of the landscape. And that's what you're looking at now. That's what you're looking at now. These passage tombs are sitting up on top about 1,000 feet high, 300 meters, about 1,000 feet high. And there's a whole group of them up there. There's an astronomical complex up there. And there's always a mixture of acoustics and astronomy. The acoustics I'll talk about today. Carrowkeel, Carn, F and G, you can see some of the complex geometry. I'm going to get into some of the geometry in a minute and show you why the geometry is related to acoustics as well. But you can see inside that each one's kind of different, but they always follow the passageways there. I can see that there. See that little stone right there? That's actually a very special item, and it can only be explained by acoustics. It's not actually embedded into the structure. It's something you actually have to step over. It's quite a hindrance. But it's an acoustic seal for sealing the long bottleneck of that passage tomb. And what they used to do is just sequentially put these in every so many feet in that long passageway. So they were basically putting apertures in, acoustic apertures, so that they could create more of an enhancement for the acoustic effect. But each one of the cairns up in Carrowkeel has their own individual specific geometry and layout. They're very, very same. They all look the same on the outside, but inside they're all it looks like they were playing around with the different geometries to get different acoustic frequencies out of the chambers. And the acoustics are amazing, by the way. I'm going to play you a video sample in a moment if I can. Carrowkeel Carn Ke, perhaps the best acoustic chamber there is up there. How many's familiar with Carrowkeel, by the way? Does everybody know Carrowkeel? Oh, wow, not many. Cara, it's in the northwest of Ireland. Most people don't go to it because it's so remote. It's up in the northwest, and Newgrange being so close to Dublin is probably famous. It's like Stonehenge. You get famous monuments, and other ones not so far away, or they don't get the limelight. But it's incredibly special. If you go to make Ireland, you've got to make a trip to. You've got two megalithic complexes beside each other, Carrowmore, Carrowkeel. But the geometrical layout, you'll see there's like an octagonal chamber. These recesses are important because they feed back the acoustics back into the central chamber. You can see that they've individually corbelled each recess, and they have an opening at the top of the corbel in each recess to feed back in the acoustics back into the central chamber. So, and when you feed that in, you're basically splitting the sound up, going in three directions, and then it comes back again and feeds back in and amplifies that, and that's what builds and drives that resonance. Plus, you're dealing with standing waves and the Helmholtz resonator effect with the long passageway into the central chamber. And then they've further acoustically sealed that long passageway by putting in these floor seals, as they're called. And I've got an example of what it sounds like with myself on the drum and my good Canadian friend who's a flutist. It actually sounds like a studio recording. And you get the idea. It's even, when you're in there and you're inside one of those recesses and there's drumming or chanting, or specifically ones that still have the high resonance inside, you actually, it's so encompassed by the whole sound that actually doing drumming long enough will actually bring you into the theta state as well, which I'm going to explain with the infrasound later on as well. Some of these actually drive theta frequencies and consciousness as well. This is Fornox Passage Tomb, County Meath. That's just a dome. It's a concrete dome protecting the structure. It was unroofed at one point, and it's just to protect the artwork inside. But I'm going to go through some of the examples of the artwork with sine waves as well. You can see this zigzag sawtooth wave. Personally, I just think they were drawing standing waves, and if they were burning incense or something like that, they would have actually visually seen those standing waves. That's personally how I think there was a natural discovery of what they seen the acoustics. Because the standing wave would be fixed between the walls of the chamber. It's actually a phenomenon that occurs in churches today. When they burn incense in the churches for ceremonies, they can see, and there's a choir singing, they can see standing waves occur in the smoky-filled top of the church where the altar is. But nonetheless, I think personally that's how they discovered these sawtooth waves, and I think that's what explains them. And there's so many examples of this waveform patterns, sawtooth standing waves. This is inside Fornox as well. Gavernine. Anybody been to Gavernine, Brittany? Okay, wow. Yeah, it's a little awkward to get to. It's on its own island. Gavernine means goat's island in French. You've got to get a ferry over to it, and if you get there late in the day, you're going to miss your ticket and you get your ferry over. But I think that's probably why it's so well preserved. But it's probably one of my favourite passage tombs in the world. I'll probably get lynched for saying that, being from Ireland, but it's an absolute masterpiece. It doesn't look the prettiest outside, but wow, inside it is amazing. There's something like 29 of these orthostats. I'll tell you in a moment. But each one of them is decorated. These upright stones are given the name orthostat, by the way. just terminology. But you can see they're showing you zigzag waves, concentric waves, how waves coalesce with each other. And that's a perfect example of constructive and destructive interference and how waves coalesce and either amalgamate to make a big wave or cancel each other out. Personally, I think that's what's drawing there. It's also called an undifferentiated passage tune. Basically, it just means it's straight to the back. There is no recess to left and right or back. It's just straight down end of chamber. And again, that's giving you a straight upstanding wave chamber. Gavrinis's acoustic art on steroids. Non-linear standing waves are depicted in dozens of engravings on megaliths forming the resonant chambers of Gavrinis Cairn, Brittany, France. 23 of the 29 standing stones are engraved with mesmerizing patterns, including concentric waveforms, double serpent spirals, concentric circles, referencing potent psychoacoustic effects in the acoustic environment. Also made out of quartz and calcite content of sandstone and limestone megaliths. Extremely difficult to carve the waveforms into a really hard rock, as the quartz content being on the hardness scale 6.5, I think, on the Mohs scale. The long resonant chamber possesses piezoelectric properties, whereby transducing all the absorbed acoustic energy into an electrical charge, that's the quartz, and enveloping an electromagnetic field. That's actually scientific. That's not like woo-woo. That isn't a known effect. It's not a massive effect, but it is an effect, and it's measurable and quantifiable. Most decorated passage tune we have, and there you can see it's just a shot straight down to the back. To think that people in 3500 BC erected that complex structure and carved all that rock art, showing you great examples of interference patterns, is just mind-blowing to me. Standing waves explained. The concentric arches engraved in the stone are careful depictions of standing waves generated by baritone chanting at the entrance of the passage chamber. This is important, male vocal range that is, constructed with the appropriate length and width to allow reflected sound waves to retrace some wave path as it moves in both directions. Basically, they have the width of the passage just tweaked just right for the baritone range. A little bit more and it wouldn't work, a little bit less wouldn't work either. As the vocal driving of the chamber proceeds, the standing waves created in the passageways intensify and they begin coupling with deep infrasound frequencies, that's ones we can't hear, in the heartbeat range. And the infrasound is the key because that's just another level of acoustics then that these guys probably had as well. So we're talking standing waves, Helmholtz resonators, and infrasound. And I guess if anybody's a bit stuck on the science, you might just have to do a little bit more research because it is a little bit complex to explain it, but it's all measurable and it's all there. Loughcrew, County Meath, Ireland. I love this place as well. You can actually stand at the top of Loughcrew and see 1/3 of Ireland from that location. You can now see out to the Leitrim Hills in the west, up to the north, the Mourne Mountains. You can see as far south as where Newgrange is in the Wicklow Hills. That's Cairn T on the left there, and that's what the rock art looks inside, with lots of examples of entoptic phenomena. Again, that chart that I showed you at the start, it's all there, all some of those symbols. They're basically saying we had altered states of consciousness. This one here, the solar wheel at the top left, and then the sunbeam would come in and do an astronomical line across it as well. So again, it's a mixture of astronomy and acoustics. Basically, I think these guys were just polymaths of the past, and they were encompassing as many different bodies of research into one little university, and that was their passage tune. That was like their body of knowledge. That's the geometry of Cairn T. I'm going to have to move fast because I've got a lot of slides to get through here. That's the geometry of Cairn T. It's quite structured. It's octagonal. Again, you can see these floor sills here. Floor sill here as well. They've acoustically sealed that long passageway. You have to physically step over these. They're not built into the structure. They're actually a hindrance walking down the structure. And when you get in there, the acoustics is absolutely amazing. And basically, like you would have the sound hole on a guitar, you would have these basically recesses were the same. They have a little aperture to get into the recess. And you'll see that's another thing about the hypogeum we're going to come to as well. So strings on a guitar are basically standing waves, and they vibrate over the sound hole, and the sound hole then creates a resonance in the chamber. That's the guitar box. And it's no different. It's the same principles. And that's what these chambers are. These little recesses are driving the acoustic resonance back into the central chamber again, and it's all about the geometry and the acoustics mixed. Let's taken me a while to do this research, by the way. It didn't come, but I did see deliberate acoustic design, and that was the important thing. I just thought there was a natural, any chamber or any room, by the way, the room we're in now has its own acoustics. Doesn't mean that that was the purpose for building it. The more I've looked and the more I've researched, I've found examples of the effects of the acoustics on their consciousness and them displaying that, and I found the effect of the acoustics being manipulated to try and make it more and more resonance. They were looking for the resonance, that's what they were looking for. And it's a difficult thing to manipulate, but they certainly built enough passage tombs to get this right. Again, you can see the floor sill here, it's not actually built into the structure, you have to step over that to get inside the recess. More examples of top, this is a veined leaf here on the right, you can see another example of entoptic phenomena. Again, you have Loch Crew, Cairn F, you've got the zigzag wavy lines. That's actually Cairn T, you were just looking at a mile away on the other hill. Loch Crew, if you're not familiar, probably was about 150 passage tombs on those 4 hills at one point. There's been decimated to about 30 left in various states of decay. Incredible amount of rock art. 75% of the rock art of the whole of Europe is on that island, by the way, Ireland. And most of it is either astronomical or consciousness, altered states of consciousness rock art. It's a little zoomed in shot. You can see again the stone on the right with the zigzag sine waves, and the serpentine squiggle and the rhombus shape as well as another entoptic phenomenon. You're probably getting the picture by now. It's the same imagery over and over again, and there's pretty much most of that chart is on the rock art in Ireland. Loch Crew, Cairn H. This is a great example because you can actually, it's open top. Some of the mound has been removed, and you can see that is the acoustic box there that they've put. Sometimes you don't just walk into this passageway, you have to step over an awkward stone. It's usually flat and it's very thin, and you have to step over it, and then you're inside another box and you have to step over that, and they've put basically an acoustic box seal at Cairn H entrance. You can see that's the second one there, and you can see I'm on the one on the right. That's my friend Daniel. He's another engineer. He's inside, and you can see that I'm standing inside the box seal there. And it's actually just not built into the masonry. It's drywalled at one point left and right, but it's not a part of the structure. They've put that in there deliberately just to acoustic seal that Helmholtz passageway. Cairn H, the floor sill chamber recess again. That's the one going. I chose this one to show you, by the way. There's so many examples of this. I chose this to show you because it's open top, you can look in. Otherwise, it's very difficult to photograph this stuff in the dark. But again, there's one of the floor sills. The floor has been built up probably about 1/2 meter, by the way, with loose chippings. It was probably down a lot lower. And here again, you have the spirals and concentric rings on that actual stone there on the left. Wow, Seafin Hill Passage Tomb. This is one of the most difficult passage tombs to get to in Ireland. It's actually on a military firing range. Funny enough, Maria was just talking about that. And you can actually see how narrow the entrance. I'm quite a wide guy. I've got wide shoulders. Even turning, and I'm slim as well. I barely fitted in that doorway. I had to go in on my side, and I could barely fit into that doorway. And it doesn't make sense with astronomy. People think that they wanted to get the sunbeam in and get a nice thin beam of sunlight or starlight. It actually doesn't open up to the sun first and foremost. It opens up 17 degrees east of north, which is an astronomical line for probably a star. But and if the passageway is long enough, that beam will be thin anyway, just like Newgrange. It's a nice thin beam by the time it gets down 60 foot. So it doesn't work for the astronomy. There's no physical reason why you would hinder yourself getting down a passageway, but they wanted narrow passageways for that narrow neck on that Helmholtz resonator. And you can see that they've put a little porch in there or some sort of and you can see that's it on the right there. They've put like a little pocket of air in there basically so that it's not just a direct line of sight into the passage tomb. Extremely narrow passage and entrance. There I am inside looking back out. You can just see how narrow that entrance is there. That's actually one of the smallest pieces of quartz on the site, by the way. You can see my hand on the left there. And all of the orthostats on the upright of that passageway, they have sheets of quartz. They have removed that granite on one side, exposing the quartz vein. And you can see there's a sheet of it just stuck to the quartz vein, stuck to the rock. And they've used them uprights as features walls. I do plan to go back here for a more acoustic testing at some point, but it's difficult to get to. You never know when the red flag is going to be up either until you just turn up there. Again, you can see the orthostats there. And the quartz sheet again, it's quite thick as well, it's about 1 inch thick. And again there. Personally, I think they were doing that because the quartz does react to the acoustics. If you put pressure on a piece of electric as well, it generates electric field. You can squeeze quartz and it generates electric field as well. And that's what the acoustics is doing. If you have a standing wave compressing the walls like that, it's putting sound pressure. It's basically putting physical force. So instead of squeezing it with your hand, you're pushing it with the sound wave, creating an electromagnetic Maze Howe chamber in the Orkney. Wow, this is probably one of the most amazing passage tombs as well. One of the biggest ones in Europe as well. It is an acoustic masterpiece. Here you can see it's actually it's like a cathedral inside. They went to extreme lengths how they've corbelled that. Instead of just corbelling it the way they went up, they then changed it and twisted it. And when you look at the geometry of all this, basically sound waves, when they hit a geometrical pattern, they will reflect in their opposite way. So if they go into a corner, they'll come back out another way. And basically, they're just driving acoustic waves all around that place. It's the internal geometric layout. You can see the schematic there. Again, it's got 8 sides to the internal chamber and recesses. The first guy I mentioned there, Dr. David Keaton and Aaron Watson, for that research Stonehenge, these guys made a little pilgrimage up there and they checked this place out for its acoustics. I won't go through the data there, it's quite tedious, just dimensions and stuff, but basically it is Helmholtz resonance of 4 hertz. They've measured it scientifically with lots of equipment. If you haven't checked out some of this acoustic experiments, is all individual guys, all going around Europe and all going around places, and archaeoacoustics is a growing field at the moment, and everybody is starting to pull their research together. It has got the impression of a Neolithic cathedral, but 4 hertz is important because that's the theta frequencies. 4 to 7 hertz is what's known as the theta frequencies, alpha, beta, theta, and when they affect your brain at about 4 hertz, you'll go into a trance-like state. So that's why I think that the acoustics was definitely the desired method for going into an altered state, although I do think they were using plant products as well, or entheogens. Okay, I've got to keep moving. Malta's temples and Hypogeum, these things are acoustically, beyond the passage tombs really. Because they're dealing with a solid bedrock, they're carving them out of rock. They're not constrained to building materials of dry walls and getting everything to fit like masonry. They're just basically carving out a solid rock. You can see that they've even tried to make it look like megalithic temples. The mindset of the people that carved the Hypogeum of Malta, it's just incredible that people can conceive that and act it out on the landscape and carve that. They've actually also curved the walls to acoustically enhance, and you'll see that in the temples above ground as well. But Malta temples and Hypogeum, they probably boast some of the best examples of acoustics. Hypogeum in Malta, I talk about these as acoustic doorways, as you can see. They've took a solid piece of rock and cut a square hole. Just like the passage tombs, they put a floor sill in. They did it in different pieces. They put 2 upright stones, a lintel, and then they put a floor sill. They did it in 4 pieces. Here, they didn't do it in 4 pieces. They just cut 1 piece and cut a hole in it. It's the same principle, same idea, same company. The aperture instead of doorways is the rule at Malta, just like the sound hole on a guitar, like I explained. Standing waves, strings vibrate outside the resonance chamber like the guitar box. The acoustic doorways are no different. Engineering manipulation of the structure to enhance the acoustics of the temple space. Another great example of acoustic doorway here. This is Neither, not too far from Hypogeum. Beautiful example. Curved parabolic walls at Neither Temple. Wow, this is another insane feat of engineering that these guys did. Not only did they build a wall in a semicircle, but they leaned it in going upwards and corbelled it at the same time. The effect of this is, like the atrius in Greece as well, is to basically build simultaneously in 3 directions, which is incredibly difficult to do, but they did it to enhance the acoustics of the room, because once you curve the wall, you're not building with the straight geometries anymore. You're refocusing all that parabolic sound into the center of the room. Another great example there of a parabolic acoustic wall. See it there? Actually, this little box here reminds me of the Orkneys as well, very similar to that. That's Sardinian temple, by the way. And nearly all of they call, instead of calling them recesses, they call them apses. But basically all of those apses and rooms, they've all got curved curvature, focusing the sound back into the center of that little recess. Hypogeum, Malta. This room is called the Holy of Holies. They give them these religious names to these chambers, but basically the whole thing is a 3-story cave complex carved by hand. I've been there probably about 7 times, and each time I go in there, I have the same thing. I have the same bizarre mindset that I just can't escape. When you or chant, or you basically, it comes back and hits you in your chest cavity. Your chest cavity will resonate at about 60 hertz below our hearing, but it's just a physical thing that happens to you. Some people are very discomforted by infrasound. You'll see that anyway. Some more examples of, it's very hard to get photographs on this. You're not allowed to photograph it. You actually do your tour by an audio, whether you like it or not. You're not even allowed to speak down there. The thing is totally controlled. And they don't like anybody having an opinion on it either. It's an incredibly controlled monument, which is sad really, because it's one of the most inspiring monuments we have. All these rooms within rooms within rooms. Every room has its own aperture going into another room. There's hundreds of rooms down there, by the way, and it may actually go down 7 floors as well. It's basically resonator within a resonator within a resonator. And if I can show you the oracle hole next, this is the most amazing part of all. You speak into this little box here with the male vocal range, and the whole 3-story cave system resonates with your voice. And it's just like going into a loudspeaker, and all you're doing is a small armor chant. They call this the oracle hole, by the way. Again, you can see the examples of entoptic phenomena, this altered states of consciousness, and that's probably what they were doing. They were going down, having altered states of consciousness with their acoustics, and this is an ossuary. It's got 5,000 remains in there, and like Maria just explained before me, thankfully, the skulls have gone missing. There was allegedly 6 skulls left out of original 5,000 remains, and nobody knows where they're at anymore, apparently in the basement in the Valletta Museum. But which brings me to Sardinia. Sardinia's hypogeums. The whole of Sardinia is just riddled with hypogeums. And I've just come back there with Maria for a Megalithic Odyssey film shoot. I'm going back again, hopefully with you very soon. It's just hypogeums everywhere. I'm going to just run through a few that I've managed to get to. You can actually see that all these doorways up here are really awkward. Some of these rooms, I'm 6'3", and I'm probably, I would struggle to get in if I was 4.5 feet tall, and I've managed to get into some of them. But incredibly small rooms. The doorways are up really high in awkward places, and it's like they're making a musical instrument, basically. The work of the columns, by the way, is a great little engineering piece. This is a panoramic shot, by the way. It's bent the image so to take it all in. And then they have these false doorways as well, similar to stuff in Peru, actually, these false doorways. Ispilunkus hypogeum. This one is amazing. There's over 35 hypogea just within 200 meters of each other in this location, just within this halfway up a mountain, just built into the hillside. See, can I get some better pictures? There's yours truly on the left there. I'm standing at that sound hole, and basically there's a reverberation of 7 seconds at that point. And you'll see they've carved, just like up in the temples above ground, they've carved an inset rim around the door into an inset rim around the door into another one. And they made these things incredibly decorative. This is the ground plan of it on the right. This is just one of the hypogeums, by the way. And they cut this into solid bedrock. But yeah, reverberation 7 seconds, and it's to have a reverberation go that long, by the way. It's insane. It's just it beggars belief scientifically. Sincantu, this is another amazing one as well. You can see some of the colour still remains. A lot of these were decorated. You'll see the next as well. Decorated with art as well. They're a lot more artistic than the Hypogeum of Malta. Hypogeum of Malta is probably acoustically. It's probably acoustically the best one we've got, and probably the most impressive in terms of its size as well. But some of the ones in Sardinia, as you'll see, are really, really beautifully decorated inside. Again, you can see the false doorway here, what this is about. There's a better shot. I see the way they've apexed the roof as well. They've always kept trying to keep their geometries the same and explore them. Ignore the green, by the way, that's just algae, by the way. It's a lot of these are in bad shape, bad states of repair. They're just open to the elements. You can just go and see these. The bull's head, by the way, up here. Sardinia is just like a whole bull cult. The whole of the megalithic people were obsessed with bull worship, which may have links with Ireland, as you'll see in a moment. But yeah, this inset within an inset doorway. It's just a common feature in all these Sardinian hypogeums. Benorva, yeah, this is incredibly beautiful. This is a throwback to Ireland here, with all these, the bull worship of, one of our Irish mythology tales is the cattle raid of Cooley, about a bull. It was wrote actually on a bull's hide as well. It's a 12th century book that survived the rages of time, but and the spirals as well, just synonymous with Newgrange, and the Orkneys for that matter too. A lot of links between the Orkneys, Malta and Sardinia and Ireland, opposite ends of Europe too. But, and the Irish court tombs of Ireland and the Sardinia bowl-shaped chambers are incredibly similar as well. Like Maria mentioned with Bellisnap with the two horns, a lot of the chambers over there are like kind of long barrows with horns on them like that. And there may be just a slightly variation. I think Bellisnap is very like that. But yeah, Benorva, this acoustics, bowl and spiral artwork solidifies the connection to Ireland. There you can see some more of the inside of it there. And again, the ground plan is almost identical to Ispelunkus, almost identical. It's like they were reproducing, but then slightly changing some recesses to explore another acoustic angle, but almost identical. It's like they had schematics and they were taking them and reproducing them somewhere at the other end of Sardinia. Extreme engineering and transmission of knowledge from one end of the island to the other. Almost finished, there we go. Infrasound hypogeums. Sardinia's hypogeums, just like Malta, are infrasound generators. There's like a different level of acoustics going on because they've got so many rooms. They're building in solid rock, not like the passage tombs where you're talking one structure, one defined shape with a Helmholtz resonator. They've got so many chambers resonating with each other, generating this infrasound. It can affect human health, infrasound. I don't know if you know that. There is natural occurring infrasound, earthquakes being one of them. But each part of the body has its own infrasound frequency that it reacts to. Chest cavity, 60 hertz, the cranium, 4 hertz to 7 hertz, and every part of the body has its own frequency. But the typical male vocal range is about 85 to 180 hertz. So that would activate the chambers, but standing waves might drive them into an infrasound range. So you can operate it with a male vocal range frequency, but the frequency will then change with the resonance and the standing waves, and then the different smaller rooms twisting those frequencies. And here's another one of Santa Pedro that I've shown you already, I think. Yeah. But yeah, Sardinia's hypogeums, it's an untold story as well. I don't think they know what they're sitting on over there in Sardinia. It's like the country is stuck in the 1960s, but and the megalithic research I don't think is being done. It's really not. That's my job, I guess. But conclusions, archaeoacoustics, it just adds another dimension to our own history. Specific ancient civilizations and cultures were equally versed in acoustics as astronomy, incorporating both of them into their structures. The intention was at some point deliberate, in some cases from the very start, and in some cases enhancement of the structures. The effect on human consciousness was at least one dividend for their efforts. It's definitely a result they were looking for. Exploration of acoustic effects and experimental construction was their methodology, and basically that was their physics of the day. They were exploring the structures and they were trying to figure stuff out, and they were trying to tweak the results in the experiments. The only difference is they had to build a very complex, arduous task of a passage tomb, whereas we'll just do it in the laboratory today with some technology. They were doing it against the odds, basically. But the effects on human health is debatable. It's likely it is one of their aspects, but I'm still open to debate on that one. But and coming soon, we have Megalithic Odyssey documentary, season 1, 8 parts. Hugh and Maria are involved, and many others. I've got a symposium coming up in August 20th as well for some of the documentary people, and you can catch that all on megalithicodyssey.com. My personal webpage, jamesswagger.com, if you don't know about it. And my Capricorn Radio TV podcast page, you'll find at capricornradio.com, and that is the forthcoming book, The Megalithic Acoustic Mystery. And I thank you for your time.